We've all heard this, right? Billions of dollars into the creator economy. And this isn't just a US phenomenon. If you go to countries like China, like live shopping is becoming big. Influencers are becoming big. If you look at a country like India, I remember actually visiting earlier in the year and learning about this creator, Raj Grover. I have friends who are like in the creator economy in India. I asked everyone, do you know who Raj Grover is? And no one did. This kid has 9 million subscribers and billions of views. And that's the scale of this, right? And especially in countries like India and China, because the countries are so big, there's all these creators that are just popping up and becoming huge. This is just really the start of the creator economy. And this idea that individuals will become way more powerful than institutions is going to spread across the world in the next few years. What is the history of creators and in the creator economy, right? And it actually goes back to like the early 1900s and even before that, because this idea that you have an artist like Da Vinci, and then you have patrons like the patron saints and the Medici family in France, that's been around for a really long time. This really started getting professionalized when Hollywood started in the 1900s. And the way it worked before was you basically had like a few big studios like Universal, DreamWorks, and a few others. And they really controlled the supply of what was put out into the world as an output, right? So like they controlled the artists, directors, or whatever. And basically in the 70s, this company started called CAA, Creator Artist Agency. And what they did is they basically took the power away from the big studios and brought it back to the creators, because instead of a studio going to an actor and saying like, this is the movie you have to do, what CAA did was they brought all the actors, they brought all the directors, they brought all the writers together, and then they would basically combine all of that into a movie. And then they would go to Universal and say, hey, here's a movie, Jurassic Park. This is the director, this is the actor. Are you guys in or not? And if you aren't, in 24 hours, we're going to the other studio, MGM or Universal or whatever. So that was sort of the shift in the power dynamics, right? And what the internet has enabled is basically a direct relationship with your audience. A great example of that is actually someone like Mr. Beast, where he's not only the character in the videos, he's the producer, he controls the distribution, he basically controls everything. And so all those different parts of like a agent and a studio and something else, all of that has collapsed into one. That's where the creator economy is going, is people at the top of the game, they can basically control everything. Another great example of this from the music side is Taylor Swift, right? She went on this really amazing tour this year, and then she made a movie for it. And instead of going to all the studios and then go to the theaters and that whole chain, she just went directly to AMC, because she doesn't really need a movie studio, right? Like what is a movie studio going to do for Taylor Swift? She's got the Swifties, she's good. And so she went directly to the movie theaters, and it became one of the biggest movies of the year. And so this is what's going to happen, right? Is slowly the power is starting to accrue to the creators and the platforms. And then one of the things that can happen in the future is if a lot of these creators get together, they can actually eventually become even bigger than these platforms. That's a world that we want to accelerate and build, right? Like Mr. Beast, Taylor Swift are really big names. And if you're a creator that's starting out or not as big, maybe you're thinking, how does this apply to me? A great example is a friend of mine, Paul, who wrote this book called Pathless Path. And in his case, he could have gone to a publishing house or all of these different things, right? And go for the what I call like the gatekeeper method, where there's all these gatekeepers till you actually are able to do what you want. And instead, he basically started building an audience online, started writing online, and then took his book and just published it, right? And it did kind of like slowly like climbed over the last year. What he published most recently is he's making tens of thousands of dollars. And because there's no publishing house involved, that is going directly to him, right? He literally put it on Amazon. The book was great, and it just spread from there. And there's so many stories like that where basically creators have eliminated the great gatekeepers and are going directly to their audience. So if you look at creators online, right, they broadly fall into two categories. There's talent, which is really much more similar to actors in Hollywood. So this would be the Mr. Beast of the world. And then there's experts, which is authors, course creators, speakers. So that's someone like a Tim Ferriss or a Brene Brown or an Ankur Warikoo, who really build an audience based on providing value and not just entertainment to their audience. And so if you look at it like 5 years or even like 10 years ago, right, both those were actually very separated, where you had people who were really going big on YouTube and building massive audiences, but they didn't understand how the expert creators were actually monetizing. So that's why you have a lot of these creators that have built these massive audiences, hundreds of thousands of followers, and they don't know how they're going to like buy their next meal because they haven't learned how to monetize that. On the other side, a lot of these experts, and this is sort of like the world that I came up in, are authors and speakers and usually come from either a business or a marketing background. So they know how to monetize. And the interesting thing there is they have really small audiences, but they know how to monetize that. The best example is Alicia Beluga, who we've interviewed and has been a client. She had an audience of less than 10,000 people and made millions from it. What's now starting to happen is these worlds are starting to merge. There's an interesting phenomena where as you get to the top of your field, there's lesser and lesser people you can connect with. You start making friendships outside of the field. If you think about the creator economy, YouTube was started in 2006 or 7, so it's less than 15 years old. And so as we're now progressing and people are getting better and better, the experts and the talents are actually starting to like merge into one. And a great example of that is Alex Ramosi, right? He's so entertaining, but he's also great at education. A16Z did this really interesting post where they described the 4 levels of the creator economy, right? So first you have the hobbyists. Hobbyist is like my friend who calls me on Thursday night and is like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. What should I do? Or this content stuff is really great. Like, can I just build an audience and become an influencer? Right? So like that's the stage where you're a hobbyist, where you're trying to like break in, but you don't really know if you want to focus on it. So the next stage is full-time creators. As a full-time creator, you've been doing this for a long time. You figure out something that works. You start getting some brand deals or maybe some courses and coaching. And this is the point where as a creator, you can support yourself. There, sort of like the challenge that you have is inexperience in running a business and really like figuring out how do you take what you've done and is working and scale that out. And usually what we find is mostly you're working alone. You have maybe a small team of contractors and you're making tens of thousands of dollars a year. So the next stage is when you sort of basically start going into like star mode, which is you've figured out what works, you start building a team around you, your revenue probably is going from hundreds of thousands to millions, and this is where people start creating brands around them. Emma Chamberlain launched Chamberlain Coffee, Yes Theory launched Seek Discomfort. That's where you go from just being a brand by yourself to building a brand around you. And the next stage is mogul, right? And the big challenge here is how do you just go from a creator with their brand to really the brands that you built becoming bigger than you as a creator. Mr. Beast launching Feastables, the Paul brothers launching Prime, Huda Beauty by Huda, Deepika launched Love Tinted. Really the goal here is how do you now go from just you as a creator to a brand that becomes bigger than you? If you look at like how creators monetize, right? It usually breaks down differently for people who are talent and people who are experts. So if you're a talent, you're generally monetizing through brand deals, partnerships with maybe other creators or brands, and merch, right? So for example, that could be energy drinks, that could be t-shirts. A great example of merch actually that a lot of people don't talk about is how Ryan Holiday launched a Daily Stoic and then found that people really wanted that coin. And the interesting thing about a coin is it's not like t-shirts where you have different sizes and different colors and all this stuff, right? He's literally just selling a coin. And I think that coin is doing millions of dollars a year. That's an example of a creator who actually is more of an expert, but all sort of like merged into this talent category and launched a product. People who are in the experts category usually monetize through speaking or coaching or consulting. And over the last like 5-10 years have started to do sponsorships and affiliates. So this is sort of how these groups generally monetize. And again, it's starting to merge now because talent is becoming experts and experts are becoming talent. The interesting thing about these models, right? When you think about merch or selling sponsorships, it's still based on sort of like what actors or creators were doing in the 20th century. An interesting shift that's happened is as creators started building a direct relationship with their audience went, I want to meet other people like you, right? So this is where creators start doing physical events, they start doing talks. And Chris Williamson, for example, was in Dubai recently doing a sold out show, right? Andrew Huberman is growing all across the US. And again, a lot of these creators are almost becoming like actors and influencers or actors with the influence that they have. An interesting way creators are starting to monetize now is basically building a community of people that are interested in the same stuff as them. And the great thing here is, let's say you're building a course. It's one to many, where you're sort of at the top and then you're disseminating a course or coaching to creators, right? So you have to do a lot of the work. When you build a community, you can start forming intersections between the people in your community. So the value shifts from just what you're doing to now like the community. A great example of the shift is someone like Sam Ovens, who spent the 2010s building courses like consulting.com and all these things where he was educating, really realized that the power of change and transformation came from not just like him as the person giving you information, but the people around you. And recently sold consulting to basically focus on building School, which is a community platform. So if you're a creator, right, you can basically, if you have an audience on YouTube, bring them over to school or another community platform like Circle, start charging people, and now you're monetizing through a direct relationship with your audience instead of just depending on a brand that might go away or something else. If you were a creator in the old model, let's say like you create some art, it has to go through the agency, then through like the movie studio, then through the distributor. And by the time when it gets to the audience, like you've gotten all this feedback from all these people that you probably don't want, and it's been watered down. Once you have that direct relationship with your audience in the community, all the sort of like benefits that come from that accrue directly to you instead of being filtered through these layers of other people before they get to you, right? And let's say then you launch another product, you can basically go directly to your audience, ask them like what they want. You can do user testing with them, you can do research with them, and basically spread the product through the audience that you've already built and the community that you've already built. You're not relying on a platform that can change the rules, right? Because you own that relationship completely directly. Great example here, right, is like someone like Taylor Swift, who's at the top of her game, but had signed this contract with Big Machine, and so didn't really even own the masters of her recordings, and basically had to go back and re-record everything. This is also like, this plays into like IP ownership and how by again, like having that direct relationship with your audience and owning everything, you actually as a creator own the IP for everything that you're creating. So if you're, let's say like a founder who's building for the creator economy, or a creator listening, what does this actually mean for you, right? We started this by talking about how there was so much investment into the creator economy. Something that hasn't really been talked about is how a lot of that went to waste. The interesting thing that a lot of VCs and founders got wrong was really like it comes down to solving either the wrong problems or at the wrong level, right? So for example, let's say you're solving problems for stars and moguls. You just don't have that many stars and moguls where even if you did build the best product, it's not a VC scale company where you can have like billions of dollars of outcome. Versus let's say if you're building for someone who's like a hobbyist or full-time creator, they really can't invest that much into a product. So you're really going for building a different kind of product where you need a lot of customers, and a lot of these companies weren't able to do that. For creators and for people building, what are the big opportunities that we're really seeing in the creator economy, right? One thing that I am fascinated by is the role AI is going to play. And this is not from the sense of, oh, AI is going to take over all the jobs of creators and all this different stuff. That's starting to happen where AI is making creation easier. But the thing that AI still doesn't bring is taste and curation, right? Because as a creator, you can tell your audience, or you can play that role with your audience of curating what's actually good, what's actually not good, what's right, what's wrong, and have that taste. An example that we use internally with the team all the time is, let's say you had a field, right? And you need 50 farmers to farm that field. Now you get a tractor, and basically what the tractor did was it enabled one person to do the job of 50 people and farm the field. And for creators, what AI is going to do is, let's say you have 100 units of work that you need to do to finish a task. The first 20 and the last 20, or maybe like parts of it, is just like repeatable stuff that can be done by someone else, right? So think of a surgeon, a brain surgeon. A brain surgeon isn't really doing everything. They have their staff that like preps the tools. So the brain surgeon can then come in and just be the expert. And that's what AI is going to do, is it's going to enable creators to just be the creators, the tastemakers, and the experts at like what they're the best at, and take care of everything else. One of the sort of like breaking points, which I think stops people from going from, let's say, like full-time to a starter or a mogul, is creators are just notoriously bad at both building and managing teams. I've talked to creators with like hundreds of thousands of subscribers that are still editing their videos, right? Because they want to hold that close. And so what AI allows you to do is accomplish much more with much fewer people. So you can then build a team of very small people. It's less people to manage. It's less people to like hold accountable. And by really creating tools around them that enable them to do much more, small teams can do much more. Another benefit that most creators have is, if you look at like a standard business, there's sales, there's marketing, and there's all these different parts of it. And I think there's actually a stat that 20 to 40% of investment into tech companies over the last few years was basically going straight back to Facebook or Google for advertising. If you're a creator, you already have a captive audience. You probably already have like tens of thousands of subscribers. And these are people that are already interested in you. And so if you can build a product for them, they're going to want to buy, right? So like if you're a creator, you can, with AI, reduce your team costs. And because you already have an audience, you don't have marketing costs. This is going to enable a lot of these individuals to start competing with much bigger institutions with a much smaller team. And that is the biggest unlock in the creator economy. I think over the next decade, a lot of these big institutions are going to start being replaced by companies from creators because, again, if people have a direct relationship with a person, they're going to buy from that person, not a big corporate company. People will buy Feastables because they know Mr. Beast instead of buying Hershey's, which I don't even know who owns them or what that company is. So, and that's really like the future we're excited about at CreatorsMBA, right? Like think of it as the Hogwarts for creators, where you have other creators that you're working with, you have experts that are coming in to teach, and it's our own little magical world where if you've already learned that skill set of like building an audience and connecting with people, we'll show you that skill set of how to build a business around it and help you become free.